That Mama Book Nook, and welcome back to my channel. I know that February is over and we're moving on to spring, which I am so excited for, but I still wanted to share my favorite romance authors, the books that I have read by them and recommend, and the books that I'm hoping to read next, and all about them. Even though romance books are perfect February Valentine's reads, romance is great for year-round reading as well. So this is going to be a pretty big episode. I could not narrow down my romance recommendations, and I will preface by saying that this is contemporary romance recommendations. So I also do read some fantasy romance and some historical romance, but I am just going with contemporary for this video. There will be plenty of mainstream authors that probably everyone who reads will have heard of, maybe not have read the books, but at least heard of these authors. And there will also be some indie authors that I have read and loved and would love to support. I do read various levels of spice. Most of these books do have some spice in them. I almost always read books that the plot still is more than the spice. I like my romance books to still have an emotional component and a plot to them. There are a couple that are closed doors, but most of them do have spice, so I'm just gonna say that from the get-go. So first up is my absolute favorite romance book to recommend, and that is Real by Kennedy Ryan. I read this book last year and I still think about it often. I recommend it to everyone. It's fantastic. This is about Neva Saint, who is an understudy on Broadway when she finally gets her moment to shine, when she needs to fill in, and it just so happens that a famous film director is in the audience that night and he asks her to be in his new film. That director is Cannon Holt, and the movie is about Desi Blue. The movie is a Harlem Renaissance biopic that is going to push the envelope and also is sure to be a huge hit. Cannon has been in a relationship with an actress before and has been burned. So he is determined to mess things up with Neva or for himself, but the attraction there is undeniable. So yeah, this is such an underhyped book, especially when I read it. It now has been republished and has like a new cover, so I am starting to see it around more, which is awesome. The characters in this book were amazing and real. They were flawed, but not in like an annoying way, and they were genuine. They were relatable while still being Hollywood stars, which was great, and I think kind of hard to do. And I loved getting the sneak peek into the movie that they were creating. I kept looking up to see if the historical figure that they were creating this movie about was a real person in our history. Unfortunately not, but it was done in such a way that you could believe that. And I really did just want to learn more about Desi too. The diversity represented in this book was some of the best that I have read. Not only did we, of course, dive into Black history, but there was also LGBTQ+ rep and chronic illness representation, because Neva suffers from lupus, and it's actually like a main plot point during the book. And then of course the romance. Why we're doing this video. Neva and Cannon's chemistry was amazing. It was so good, and then the way Cannon cared for Neva during lupus flares, or in general when she was dealing with medical issues, was truly swoon-worthy. So I highly, highly recommend, if you take any book from this video, this is the one, please. So what's up next for me from Kennedy Ryan? Because that's the only one I've read, but I've pretty much put her backlog on my TBR at this point, but I think the one that I would like to pick up next is her Skyland Valentine series, the first book being Before I Let Go. I have literally heard nothing but good things about this series and the books, and I really am dying to read more from her. But as I said, she does have an extensive backlog, and at some point I'd like to read them all, honestly. Next is an indie author that I have read 3 advanced reader copies from at this point, and I have loved every single one of them. 5 stars across the board, even though they all are a little bit different. And that author is Jennifer Milliken. As I said, each book is really different. Some are kind of funny, some are tragic and emotional and rip your heart out. Some are a bit nostalgic. But again, I recommend every single one of them. So the first one that I read, which is the one that introduced me to her, was Here for the Cake, and this follows Paisley and Klein. Paisley's sister is marrying Paisley's ex-boyfriend. Paisley isn't jealous. They broke up for a reason, but she isn't exactly thrilled either. Like, that just doesn't feel good. Klein is trying to publish his first novel, but he doesn't have a social media presence, so he is getting nowhere. And in the meantime, he's working as a bartender. Paisley and Klein do know each other from college, so during Paisley's sister's bachelorette party, they happen to go into Klein's bar. Paisley and Klein's history in college wasn't great. They had like a weird, like, worst kiss ever moment, and then they were in a creative writing class together, and Klein tore her writing apart. It was anonymous. He didn't realize it was her, but at that point then, like, any hope for them was over. So then they haven't seen each other since graduating. Paisley ends up getting separated from the bachelorette group, and Klein kindly escorts her back to her hotel. When the very intoxicated bachelorette party asks Klein, "Who are you?" he jokingly introduces himself as Paisley's boyfriend, and the group goes wild about this. And so now they're kind of stuck in this fake dating situation because they say he has to come to the wedding. So sure enough, now he is invited to Paisley's sister's week-long wedding extravaganza as Paisley's boyfriend. In exchange, just to make it fair, Paisley will help market his book. She happens to own her own marketing company, which is very convenient. And so starts the best fake dating novel. To be clear, the fake dating is one of my absolute favorite tropes, so I eat it up every time. This already put that book high on my list, but it did not disappoint. I may have mentioned this in like a previous wrap-up video because I did read this around the time when I started the BookTube channel, but you know that Jennifer Milliken is a romance reader herself because she eliminates all the annoying plot devices that some authors use despite the fact that a lot of readers don't like them. Third act breakup? Nope. Miscommunication? Nope. They talk about it like adults at the first chance they get. And she put in all the best parts. Banter, amazing. One bed, you know it. Laugh out loud lines, so good. And Klein is a gentleman. He notices all the little details about Paisley, which is like one of my favorite microtropes, and he brings them out at the perfect times. I loved it. So then the next book was What We Keep. Again, completely different from Here for the Cake. This is about Avery, who wakes up alone and her house is on fire. She does the right thing. She calls 911. She tries to stay as calm as possible in that situation and follows all the instructions from the 911 operator. The fire moves very quickly, but the firefighters do get there in time, and one firefighter in particular carries her out to safety. She suffers some smoke inhalation, but otherwise is fairly unharmed. After being discharged from the hospital, she stops by the fire station to properly thank the firefighter who saved her, Gabriel Woodruff. Now, this story is actually told in 2 parts. Part 1 is a series of flashbacks via Avery speaking to her therapist and telling her story. Avery and Gabriel seem perfect together, get married, but there is definitely some heavy baggage behind the scenes and communication in the marriage is lacking. Divorce feels inevitable. Then part 2 is told in dual point of view, Avery and Gabriel, as they rediscover their love, their marriage, and themselves. Honestly, I was hesitant about this book because even though I loved Here for the Cake so much, because this one definitely seemed to have some of the things that I just mentioned are not in the other book. Some miscommunication, some breakup periods of time. Marriage in trouble is not something that I thought I would connect to as well. But Jennifer Milliken said, trust me, read it, you will be surprised. Even if you think it has tropes that you don't like, give it a shot. And then again, after loving Here for the Cake, I was like, what do I have to lose? And wow, 5 stars again. This is why I personally feel like no trope is 100% off limits. Because when it's done really well and it makes sense for the story, it doesn't matter. Tropes are tropes for a reason. Like they are part of real life. So it's just how it's written and how it connects and pulls the reader in that really matters. I really enjoyed the layout of this story with the 2 parts. The first part, with having the flashbacks with the therapist, was so interesting. Avery also is a therapist herself, so she really could dive deep with her therapist. And then, of course, the dual point of view in the second part is chef's kiss. When the author knows what they're doing and builds you up, breaks your heart, and then builds it back together again, there is something so special about those books. Because again, as I've said many times, probably even in this video, I love an emotional read. And that's exactly what happened with this one. The emotions are so raw, but I loved every second of it, even when it was breaking my heart. So I just couldn't get enough. The mental health representation was obviously done really well. Of course, check your triggers. This definitely deals with some heavier topics, but if you don't have any of the triggers, definitely give it a shot. And then most recently, I read Penn. This is about the town of Olive Township. The town is looking forward to the day when Daisy St. James marries the town golden boy, Duke, including Daisy's terminally ill mother. Except Daisy's not in love, and Duke's not either. But Daisy doesn't really care because she doesn't really believe in the idea of love. This is very much a mutual, transactional marriage. But then a mysterious stranger named Peter comes into town. He has a Navy SEAL tattoo surrounded by daisies. He feels very familiar to Daisy too. Then one day he says something to Daisy that only someone named Penn from her past would know. Penn Bellamy is back in Olive Township to get his late mother's estate in order, grab a sandwich, and leave again. He ends up speaking to Daisy and getting a little too involved in her life, which he had not planned to do. When Daisy finally learns the truth that Peter is actually Penn, and Penn discovers that Daisy's marriage or engagement is just for convenience and there's no feelings involved, the emotions between the two take off. This is the first of what's going to be a 4-book series inspired by The Princess Bride, and I loved it. I loved that they were still pining for each other after all these years, because it really had been so many years since Penn had left. Penn and Daisy were really just kids when he left, which also explains why the recognition wasn't there immediately for Daisy, even though, as I said, she felt like he was familiar but couldn't place it. It had been a long time. And the hidden identity piece really was quite fun. I loved the characters. Daisy was super relatable, under so much pressure to make everyone else happy. And Penn was so lovable and caring. Even when he was hiding his identity, he was so sweet sweet, also in that like grumpy romance main character way that us readers love. At this point, I know that Jennifer Milliken knows how to write banter and chemistry, so this one also did not disappoint in that department. I haven't seen The Princess Bride in such a long time, but I was still able to pick up on a few connections, which was fun, but you definitely don't need to have seen The Princess Bride or been a fan of it to enjoy this book at all. I think Princess Bride fans will just have an extra level of fun finding some of those Easter eggs and similarities. So what am I going to read next from Jennifer Milliken? While I wait for Hugo's book, which is the second book in this Princess Bride series. The series is called Olive Township. That one won't come out to the fall. So in the meantime, I would really like to pick up a backlog book from her, and I think I'm going to start with Our Finest Hour, which apparently went viral on TikTok a few years back, and it sounds like another emotional one. So I'm super excited to try it since I'm clearly a fan of her work. Next, Eve Blakely is an indie author who writes beautiful, emotional romances. I don't know if all of her books are closed door, but this series that I'm going to be talking about is a closed door fade to black series. I ended up getting connected with her during her second book in the Cliffhaven series, and that book was called Versions of Us. This is a dual point of view, closed door, small town, second chance romance that I highly recommend. A quote from it, "You can be anywhere when the world caves in, but you can also be anywhere when your life begins." I absolutely loved this book. As I said, Versions of Us is number 2 in the Cliffhaven series. This one can be read as a standalone. So this book tells the story of Kristen, who is a psychology student who works part-time at the local crisis hotline center, and Alex, often referred to by his last name Henley, a bartender at the local tavern who was just promoted to manager. They both seem to be in a really good spot in their relationship and in their life in general until Henley essentially disappears for 6 months and returns with another woman. He is not the same person when he left, and Kristen doesn't know what to make of her feelings. Other than, of course, she's furious that he broke her heart. I'm not going to spoil the plot because it's surprising and interesting, so it's better to go in not really knowing much more. Kristen is a really strong character that really has like a good understanding of human emotions and that it's okay to make mistakes. She will make a great counselor someday, for sure. And Henley is definitely book boyfriend material, always taking care of others physically, emotionally, even if it means making really hard choices. Another like little quote from the book, they would say, "Dum spiro spero," which means, I assume in Latin, while I breathe, I hope. When I tell you, I repeated that phrase so many times while I was reading it. The mental health representation, another one, was just really well done. I even cried reading it at times because Eve Blakely did just such an amazing job of pulling the reader into Kristen and Henley's story. You couldn't not root for them and love them. I then read the third book, also as an advanced reader copy, which was called The Version You Hide. This one I do recommend reading. You have to have read the second book before reading the third unless you want to be pretty spoiled for the second. Technically it could be read as a standalone, but it spoils the second book. My telling you the plot, the synopsis won't spoil it though, don't worry. So our female main character is Mackenzie in this book, who has not had the best upbringing. She's had no parental guidance and a traumatic past with an ex-boyfriend. Definitely check your triggers. Luckily now in Cliffhaven, she is ready for a fresh start. She has a job working at a local tavern owned by a man named Dylan. Remember that for a second. She's making friends and just honestly living a much calmer, quieter life, especially as she works through some of her PTSD and trust issues. So now to Dylan. Dylan's an optimist, loves life type of guy. He's come from like a well-to-do life, but he's rejected that. He loves owning the bar, fixing up an old boat, and also leads scuba diving tours. stars. He's intrigued by Mackenzie, thinks she's great, and he even knows her history and wants to be there for her. Dylan and Mackenzie start off with a very sweet friendship to build some of that trust, and it grows from there. I have said it before, but I do enjoy in series when you get to like third book and beyond. Like obviously not jumping the shark or, you know, overdoing it, but there is that feeling of coming home when you're back in this familiar setting and characters that maybe you've been introduced to in previous books, but now you get to know on a little bit deeper level, especially in a small town romance series for sure. And this series is so wonderfully written. In this book, I loved Dylan. Eve Blakely does a great job with her social media, and during the promotion of this book, she did like all of her male main characters, like he's a 10 but, and you know, it go on. And when she got to Dylan, it was he's a 10 but no, actually he's just a 10. And it's so true. He really is. He's so kind, generous, a genuine good guy. I loved that, and I especially loved that for Mackenzie, who just needed a good guy. The character growth, especially for Mackenzie, was great. I love, you know, to see, I don't love that characters experience trauma, but I do love to see their healing process over time in such a healthy way. Eve Blakely does a really nice job with taking that care with mental health in her books, both in the second book and the third book. Harper, who is a side character in this book, will be getting her own story in book 4, which will be the last book in this series, and I'm super excited to read that one. Eve Blakely also did put out a holiday romance, just like a standalone, called Picture This Christmas, which I also did read. I'm not going to go into the synopsis since we're in the holiday times even a little bit right now, but maybe around the holidays I will chat about that one a little bit because I enjoyed it. Anyway, 4th book comes out later this year. Eve Blakely has recommended reading the first book in the series because the characters, at least the male character, comes a little bit from that story, and that is the one book that I haven't read in this series, and it hasn't been a big deal up until now, but I have it on my Kindle and I want to read it, so that will be the next book that I pick up from her. Should tell you what that book is called. That book is called The Other Version. So it's The Other Version, Versions of Us, The Version You Hide, and the 4th book is The Darkest Version, I think. So kind of a cool tie-in between the titles. Next is a romance author that everyone knows and loves. I still can't believe that I've only read one book from this author, and that is Emily Henry, the queen of romance. I read Funny Story last year, and I loved it. 5 stars. Daphne is engaged to Peter. Peter has a best friend named Petra. Petra is in a relationship with Miles. Stay with me. Peter calls off his wedding to Daphne to begin a fast-moving relationship with Petra. So obviously Petra also at the same time is breaking up with Miles. Daphne and Miles are pretty devastated because they thought they were in love with their significant others and were pretty blindsided by the breakups. Daphne and Miles, while kind of mutually grieving, connect a little bit and are trying to figure out logistics and end up moving in together just as roommates. Also as roommates, they receive an invitation to Peter and Petra's wedding, which is obviously like another total slap in the face to both of them. Daphne and Miles drunkenly respond yes, and as a couple. So now they're stuck in a fake dating situation. Although I did find in this book the fake dating was really only when Peter and Petra were involved. They weren't necessarily trying to fake it to family and other friends and things like that. It was mostly just as this outward facing relationship for if Peter and Petra went snooping or if they bumped into each other type thing. And they're also in a forced proximity situation as roommates. They also really do become close friends, which then starts to grow. I have been wanting to read an Emily Henry book for a while, so I'm glad I had the opportunity to pick this one up as, I forget if it was like a book club or buddy read type situation. The romance between the two characters was great. The connection was there and they were both really likable. So it was easy to root for them and be happy for them. The side characters were also really fun, particularly Daphne's friend Ashley and Miles' sister Julia. I love a complicated backstory. This one definitely had some messy family dynamics, career discussions. Daphne is a children's librarian, which also was just like a fun component to it. And then obviously the relationship issues with Peter and Petra. I loved seeing Daphne and Miles, and honestly just like other characters in the book help each other to grow. Definitely a fun summer read that I recommend. I really don't think I can go wrong with Emily Henry's backlog, so I'm thinking either Book Lovers or Beach Read next, but I also think I'm going to be reading her like upcoming new release, Great Big Beautiful Life, with one of my book clubs, so I might end up getting to that one first, because I think we're reading that in May. Another indie author that you may or may not have seen around is Sarah Reddy. She is the author of the Ghosted series. I usually hate reading books out of order, but similarly to Eve Blakely, I ended up being an advanced reader copy reader for like a later book in the series, not the first book. And it didn't end up being a big deal, but still, like, usually, ideally, I like to read in order, but it's what it is. So I read both the third and the fourth book. I think the fourth book is the last one in this series. The third book is called Fated. This follows Fiona. Her and her brother own a well-known high-end watch company in Geneva. The watch company is really special to her. After recovering from a terrible incident that happened one night, Fiona is given a really special family heirloom. It is a watch that is supposed to tell you your deepest desires while you dream. Fiona decides to give it a try, so she holds the watch as she falls asleep, and it does transport her into a very realistic seeming dream. However, she does not enter the dream as herself. She enters the dream as a woman named Becca, who has an established life on a secluded island. Becca is married with 2 children, but is cheating on her husband. A very different life from the life that Fiona lives in the real world and, wants to live. Fiona does want to make the most out of this dream experience, though, and really try to find out what the dream is trying to tell her about her deepest desires. So she gets to know the husband, Aaron, and the kids, and the other people on the island. Eventually, Fiona starts falling in love with Aaron. I thought this magical realism book was so unique. It was confusing in the beginning a little bit because I had a lot of questions about the magic. From the get-go, I was curious, like, is this really a dream? Why was she entering someone else's life? And, from the synopsis, we knew that she was going in falling in love with a man in her dreams, and we know that this is a romance genre book. I was curious where this was going because she, I assume, wasn't going to be able to live as Becca for the rest of her life. And Fiona actually also has a daughter in her real life, so she's also not just going to abandon her daughter for this other life as a different woman. And this mysterious plot continued for quite a while before I received some of the answers. That being said, I thought this book was really well written. This book did not feel repetitive, even though there was a rhythm to it. She lives in her real life, she falls asleep with the watch, she lives in the dream life, she wakes up, and it cycles through, but it didn't feel repetitive. I think the author really understood that we get it. We don't need to be retold every time that she's falling asleep with the watch and blah, blah, blah. We know that when she's entering the dream state, that's where she is and whatnot. So I appreciated that. I loved the characters. I loved the plot. The twist was so surprising, which hasn't happened to me in a while. So that was excellent. I even teared up. As I mentioned, this is the 3rd book in the Ghosted series, but I have not read the first 2. That did not affect me at all. I'm not even sure if they're interconnected or if they're both just about this kind of like magical realism aspects. I definitely can't wait to go back and read those ones though. But then I did read the 4th book in the series, which is called Wished. Anna is a romantic who hasn't found her true love yet. She cleans houses and she does pine over the owner of one house. His name is Max, who doesn't even know she exists. He owns a jewelry empire. He is a character from the 3rd book, but that is a very minor crossover. And again, I'm not sure there was actually crossovers in the first 2 books. Then one day, Anna makes a wish, and the next morning she wakes up as Max's wife, and everyone remembers they've been happily married for years, except for Max. Now they're kind of both in this together to figure it out. So yeah, this is just another cute, unique, magical realism book. Each book in this series, I think, has a different form of magical realism. So there was the watch that showed your deepest desires while you're dreaming, and now there is this magical wish. It was on a piece of jewelry. So yeah, really interesting. The first book, I think, has, from even just the title, Ghosted, I'm pretty sure falls in love with a ghost aspect. And the second one is called Switch, and I'm pretty sure it's like a Freaky Friday, like switching bodies type book. So again, all for kind of unique, fun aspects. I didn't love how Max treated Anna in the beginning, but their relationship definitely grew on me over time. And as I briefly mentioned, Max was a character in Fated, and in that book he definitely did deserve to get a happy ending, so I'm glad that he did get one. And there was then a reason for me to be rooting for him and wanting him to have happiness, even though he was a bit grumpy in the beginning. So yeah, I haven't read the first 2 books, Ghosted and Switch, so those will definitely be the next ones that I pick up. Sophie Cousins is another author that does romance books that I've really come to enjoy. I first read The Good Part. This is another magical realism. You know, the stereotypical 20-something-year-old who's trying to find her place in the world. No money, roommates, lousy low-level job, and the dating scene is abysmal. So Lucy Young, the main character in The Good Part, has all that. So when she comes across a wishing machine, she wishes to skip to the good part in her life. Sure enough, the next morning she wakes up and it's 16 years later. She has a gorgeous husband, dream job, and 2 adorable children. Everyone around her just thinks that she has amnesia because she can't remember, but she truly believes that she has skipped ahead in her life. However, she's also missed out on a lot of her life, some good, some heartbreaking, and even if she can figure out how to live her life just in this time period and go forward, does her life have the same meaning if she hasn't gone through all those other experiences to get there? I'm making the synopsis sound a little bit corny, and maybe in some ways it was, but it was really so cute. I thoroughly enjoyed Lucy's character, and I could definitely relate. Sometimes I definitely find myself wishing away difficult phases, but would I actually want to skip them? No. I think ideally I would just have like a crystal ball that would tell me that everything's gonna, work out this way, and so that I didn't have to stress so much during those difficult times. But back to the book, I loved the characters in this one. The kids were hilarious. Her oldest was convinced that she was abducted by aliens or came through a portal. Lucy's friends were awesome, supportive. Even her parents and coworkers were all really interesting characters. I love seeing Lucy find herself and connect or reconnect with her husband and kind of rekindle that love, at least from his perspective. It definitely had that rom-com movie feel where you know how it's going to end up, but you still enjoy the ride throughout the whole thing. Then just recently I read Is She Really Going Out With Him? This is about columnist Anna Appleby, who is divorced, also has 2 children. Her office rival Will is vying for her column, but she really needs the income, so that would be pretty devastating for her to lose that. So in kind of like a desperate attempt, she pitches a unique idea where she will go on 7 dates and write about them, but the dates are all chosen by her children offline, which is hard to do in this day and age, not only the kid aspect, but to meet people offline in a dating aspect. Anna begins to put herself out there, from waiters to the mailman, even her celebrity crush, but then a romantic connection appears when she's least expecting it. This was another cute one. I loved the premise of it with the kids picking the dates. I thought that was so fun. And most of the dates were pretty humorous, so it kept me entertained for sure. There was also certainly an emotional component with Anna opening herself back up to love, to relationships and healing after her divorce. Will annoyed me a little bit at first because he's legit trying to take her job. Why would you do that to someone you had a crush on? That I didn't like that. I actually didn't even realize that he was the love interest for a little bit into the book. Whereas most of the time you know. He did grow on me though. I did still really enjoy this one. I ended up giving it 4 stars if you're curious. Next from her, I think I want to go back and read Just Haven't Met You Yet. Also, it's totally dawning on me that all of her titles are also song lyrics, which is super fun. Now I need to go back and look what else she's written because that's really cute. Another queen of romance, mainstream, that I am shocked that I've only read 1 book from is Ali Hazelwood. I read Not in Love last year. Rue works as a biotech engineer for a startup food science company called Klein. She leads a very controlled life with lots of rules and boundaries in a way to protect herself. Rue didn't have the best upbringing at all, but she feels very safe in her relatively simple, successful life that she's created. When the owner of the company she works for and her friend explains that people from a group are trying to take over Klein, Rue is concerned and pretty protective. Then she realizes one of those people is a man named Eli, who she met on a dating site the night before. Eli and his company will stop at almost nothing to get Klein, and they're getting closer and closer to being successful. But Eli also wants Rue, and he can't stop thinking about her. Rue and Eli feel like the other one should be off limits, but they cannot stop the attraction between each other. So I think I also talked about this one on a previous one, but I'm just gonna say it again. For better or for worse, in this book, a few chapters in, I decided to put on a different lens when I read about Rue. I decided to read it with a more neurodivergent lens. It's never explicitly stated, and I'm kind of on the fence of whether it should have been or not. I think it would have been great representation, but I also feel like it would be really unlikely given Rue's upbringing that her mom would have brought her for any sort of diagnosis, or B, that Rue would have had the means to investigate that herself. Regardless, reading it with this lens, I felt like I could connect with her a lot more, just giving a little bit more understanding to where she was coming from. And then the way that Eli was so patient and understanding with her was great to see. There was a lot of spice in this one. This is one of the spicier ones comparatively, but I still felt like there was a good amount of plot. I've read some reviews that disagree with me, but I felt like the plot was there. Even in the synopsis, you can hear that there is a plot and a point to the book. I didn't love in this one the it wasn't insta love, but insta infatuation. It seemed a little over the top for me, but I did still enjoy the book. It's probably one of my lower rated ones in this group, but overall I did like it, and it definitely still made me want to try more books from her. So I'm actually currently reading Deep End, her newest release from her, and I'm liking it so far. I'm not super far in, but it's definitely enjoyable, and I've been hearing more good things about this one overall from the community. You'll notice a trend that even though I'm gobbling up these books pretty quickly, I am fairly new to some of these uber popular romance authors. So last year I also read my first 2 Abby Jimenez books, and I loved them. The first one I read was her newest one before this next one comes out. She has one coming up, and that was Just for the Summer. Justin posts on Reddit and Am I the A thread about naming his so ugly he's cute dog after his roommate, after Brad, his best friend. In the post, he also goes on to explain that every woman he dates ends up, when they eventually break up, goes on to find their one, special one, their soulmate, so to speak, after the breakup. Like he's always the last boyfriend before the husband. Emma, our female main character, reads this and reaches out because she has the same problem. She's always the last girlfriend before the wife. After chatting back and forth a little bit and being friendly, they decide to date each other to see if they can break their so-called curse. Then maybe after they break up, they'll both go on to find their forever person. Luckily, Emma and Maddie, her friend, are traveling nurses, so they can come to where Justin lives for the summer and put their plan into action. Both Justin and Emma have a lot going on in their personal lives, lots of messy family dynamics, so neither of them are expecting the love that develops as the summer goes on. As I said, I absolutely loved this one. Here was another complicated backstory that I love. Emotional reads, a little bit of a broken record, but I can't help it. I have to point it out. And it's not even all tied in like a neat little bow for the characters to, it doesn't need everything to be resolved. And I want to feel something when I read these books, and for me to feel things, it feels like it needs to be true. I need to feel connected to the stories. I need to feel connected to the characters. I need to believe them, and I need to root for them. This book did that though. I loved Justin, Emma, Maddie, Sarah, Alex, Chelsea, and Brad too. Also, Justin was so thoughtful and creative with his dates. He made polls and invitations, and it was so fun. Both Emma and Justin's situations were really, really hard, and I liked how Abby Jimenez dealt with that. Lastly, lots of amazing quotes in this book too, which is always nice when you want to jot things down. Then I decided, okay, now I need to go back and read some backlog from her since I enjoyed it so much. So why not start at the beginning, since I guess there also is a lot of crossover amongst her books, even though they're kind of series, kind of standalones, but even I think there might be crossovers among series. That might not be true, but so don't quote me, but there's definitely lots of Easter eggs and things like that. So, start at the beginning. I picked up the friend zone next. Kristen Peterson is helping to plan her best friend's wedding. She meets the best man of the groom, Josh Copeland, and immediately clicks with him. Kristen is currently dating another man who is serving overseas, but is coming home soon-ish. That relationship does eventually end, and then there's finally room for Josh and Kristen to really connect. The only problem is that Josh wants a big family, and Kristen may never be able to have children of her own due to some medical issues. I did think that this was a decent debut. It definitely had the emotional aspects there. I just felt like there was some major triggers that could have been handled a little bit differently in the story. These aren't unique feelings. If you go read reviews, there's lots of people who address it. I personally don't have those triggers, so I was able to still enjoy the story, but I could see where some people would have been really turned off by it. So then next up, continuing on with the series, will be the Happy Ever After playlist. Okay, Jen Comfort is a super special romance author to me because not only does she seem like the sweetest and funniest human being in the world, but her book, What is Love, was my first ever advanced reader copy, and I absolutely loved it. So it was wins all around, so many hearts and butterflies and happy feelings, 5 stars. It was a great rivals to lovers story about Teddy and Maxine, who are battling against each other in a Jeopardy-esque game show called Answers. The steamy tension is there from the beginning, but neither of them want to admit that, of course. When they are called to play in the ultimate championship round of the game show, some gameplay weaknesses have shown up in the past for each of them, which ends up encouraging them to seek help from each other in studying in more ways than one, if you get my drift. So this is all in order to prepare for the big game and major prize money. So then, not only was the banter top-notch, lots of nerdy facts sprinkled amongst everything too. It was so witty. I just want to be friends with Jen Comfort in real life. Spice, also top notch, but really the personal growth and the relationship with each other was so heartwarming throughout the entire book too. And I loved the representation of bisexual and neurodivergence. Maxine has ADHD and that is talked about. I will definitely recommend. I can't wait to read more from her. She has 2 other books that she had published previously to this one, The Astronaut and the Star and The Midnight Duet. The Midnight Duet is a reverse Phantom of the Opera retelling, and I have since purchased both of them. They are sitting and waiting for me on my shelves, and I'm not sure which one I'm going to pick first, but I can't wait to read those. Farah Roshan is a new romance author to me that I was introduced to this past summer. I really enjoyed her book, Pardon My Frenchie, which is actually behind one of the pink books up there. It was so cute. Ashanti owns a growing dog boarding business, adorably called Barkingham Palace, and she's actually eyeing a new building to keep up with demands. Thaddeus is recently home from the military and helping to care for his grandmother's dog Puddin. His grandmother has recently been placed in assisted living that unfortunately doesn't allow dogs, so that's why he's taking care of him. Also, unfortunately, Thad is not a dog person, and he and Puddin have really never gotten along anyway. Puddin is best doggy friends with Ashanti's dog, Duchess, and when a video of the 2 dogs doing something adorable goes viral, Ashanti and Thad are forced to see a lot of each other. It's a slow burn, especially since they are opposites, and Thad can be very grumpy, especially about dogs, but they eventually start falling for each other. Again, this book was so cute. If you're a dog lover, I definitely say this is one that you should pick up, and even if you aren't, this is still a super fun read. I loved Ashanti's character. She was another strong, business-oriented woman who also is the caretaker of her 2 teenage sisters. She had it together for sure. And Puddin and Duchess, the cutest. There were so many fun dog moments in this book. The romance between Ashanti and Thad was also very sweet, and I loved what they both brought to the relationship, helping each other with different aspects of their personal lives. Because life is messy and complicated, and that's what happens. Both characters had also really interesting backstories that played a part in this book, and of course the side characters were great too. Next up, I want to try her boyfriend series. The first one is called The Boyfriend Project. A romance author that I'm going to be reading a lot more of this year is Tara DeWitt. I read Funny Feelings and The Co-op last year. Funny Feelings is about Farley and Meyer, who are 2 stand-up comedians. Meyer is retired for actually many years now. He is a stay-at-home dad, really raising his deaf daughter Hazel, and Farley is really just getting started in her career. Meyer ends up becoming her manager to help her kind of fine-tune her act and shows her the ropes. Over the years, they become close friends, honestly, almost more like family, which maybe is weird to say since they become in a relationship later, but like so close with each other. Farley already knew how to sign, so that was a great skill for her to already have to be part of Meyer's life with his daughter as well. Farley gets a great opportunity to work with 2 already very well-known established stand-up comedians in an upcoming comedy tour. The only catch is they want her to be in a fake relationship with Meyer, as he is also a very well-known comedian from back in the day. Even though he hasn't been on stage for some time, he still definitely has that notoriety, gets recognized. They think that will help with publicity for the tour. Farley and Meyer agree, but honestly the feelings are already there and have been there for a while, just neither of them really wanted to open up or talk about their feelings. So it is a slow build, but as I said, the relationship is there, and ultimately the true feelings come out, of course. It's a romance book. This one was a lot of fun. There was a couple things that annoyed annoyed me. I loved the comedian vibes. So many lines in this, I literally laughed out loud while I was reading. In general, I thought two comedians dating was such a fun and unique plot as well. I hated their reason for fake dating, and that's coming from someone who loves fake dating. Fake dating is one of my favorite tropes, but I need it to be believable. What I did find believable was the relationship between the two of them, though. That's one thing that I like about a slow burn, and when I talk about the co-op in a second, this is clearly something Tara DeWitt does really well. I could see the feelings were already there when I was reading, so when they did finally enter into the real relationship, it wasn't hard to imagine as a reader. Both of their personalities were like a little bit more awkward, so sometimes there were some like more awkward than necessary moments in my opinion, but again, it fit with their personalities, so I mostly could let that go. Overall, witty, funny read, and I really enjoyed laughing so much. And then the co-op is about Lauren Levine and Deacon Leeds, who had a summer fling as teens. Their grandmothers were married to each other, but after they passed, they left. Lauren and Deacon shared ownership of their building in Santa Cruz that needs a lot of work. So now they're kind of thrust back together and they need to figure out how to work together. Lauren has money, but to access her trust, she needs to be married. Deacon has construction expertise, but no funds. So they get into a marriage of convenience and they agreed that it's just going to be long enough to fix up the property, turn a profit, and cut ties. It's an emotional ride, but they do eventually learn how to work together and acknowledge their feelings of both past and present. Another slow burn that I enjoyed. I didn't fully agree with the reasons why they didn't like each other after like they kind of went separate ways as teenagers and why they were still holding on to that as adults. Miscommunication is rarely my favorite, but it doesn't necessarily kill the book. It's just not my favorite. But I still loved the characters, I loved the storyline, and I think everyone watching probably knows how stressful it is to renovate and live through it, especially with someone else. So the banter was great. So next up, I received an advanced reader copy of Left of Forever, which comes out in May, so I want to read that one in April. But before that, I want to read Savor It in this month because I hear it's good to read that one. There, I think, is like a little crossover or Easter eggs. I don't necessarily think it's a series, but they're somehow connected. So I have the time. I want to try to read Savor It, and then I'll be reading Left of Forever. The last two authors are newer authors that I actually have read all of their romance books for the most part. So I'm just kind of excited to see what's up next for them and keeping them on my radar, and I think you should too. All of the rest of the books I'm going to be talking about were 5-star reads for me that I will just preface that, so I will be gushing. The first author is Jessica Joyce. I first read You with a View, which was her debut. Noelle and Theo have been rivals since grade school. Now they're adults and have gone separate ways, although secretly have kind of been keeping tabs on each other, sometimes not so secretly. Noelle now is back living at home, unemployed after a failed career, really took a hit to her self-esteem, and though she once really loved photography, she has not picked up her camera in some time. She's also very deeply feeling the loss of her grandmother who passed away recently unexpectedly. When she finds pictures and notes written to her grandmother from a previous love who is not her grandfather, Noelle posts a TikTok in hopes to find this man's identity and success. The past love's grandson reaches out to her and says, hey, that's my grandfather. So, and the grandfather is still alive. So the grandson, the grandfather, and Noelle all meet up for coffee. And of course, it turns out to be none other than Theo is the grandson. And the grandfather's name is Paul. Paul sheds some light on his relationship with Noelle's grandmother. And all three, Noelle, Paul, and Theo, end up taking a long road trip to live some of the memories between Paul and Noelle's grandmother that never were able to be created. Of course, the rivalry between Noelle and Theo is alive and well as some sparks. It's hard to talk about this many romance books and not just repeat the same adjectives over and over again, but this book was so sweet. The rivalry to lovers trope was done so well. It is another one of my favorites because it creates such excellent banter, and then each of the characters finds their way into your heart. Of course, Noelle and Theo, the main characters, not without their faults, but they were honest and real and not annoying. Paul is like every reader's grandpa now. And even Thomas and Sadie, who are Noelle's brother and sister-in-law slash best friend, who never failed to make me laugh. I loved going on the journey with Noelle, Theo, and Paul, getting to visit places that I've never visited, but are definitely some bucket list destinations. And watching Noelle and Theo learning how to re-love themselves to not only develop the connection between each other. And the ending was swoon. Highly, highly recommend this read. Then her latest release is called The X-Vows. Georgia Woodward is a master list maker. She even has a list about her ex, Eli Mora. It's full of do's and don'ts that she's created around their relationship since they broke up 5 years ago. Their best friend, Adam, is getting married, and they are both best woman and best man. So Georgia and Eli are going to have to see each other quite a bit, so Georgia is relying heavily on that list. Eli arrives for the wedding from New York, and he seems different. Then the wedding venue burns to the ground, and Adam begs Eli and Georgia for help together. So now they head off to Napa Valley, another kind of road trip, to pull off the perfect wedding, and old chemistry definitely returns. Georgia starts recognizing the man she fell in love with. Now, I may not have lists about my exes, but I still am definitely a big list maker. So I definitely resonated with Georgia about that. The entire situation with the wedding was wild and entertaining. All the situations they were put in front of, the cranky cake baker, awful DJ auditions, etc. And honestly, I have become such a sucker for second chance romance. My husband and I have been together since high school, and we never broke up, which is obviously special too. So I thought that I didn't connect with a lot of second chance romances, but I'm finding when reading these again, like well-written second chance romances, that there's something so special about people finding each other again after growing up a little bit and learning how to communicate a little bit better. And then the friendship between Georgia, Eli, and Adam was so sweet. I loved it. It also had some great mental health representation, especially from like a male mental health aspect. So as I mentioned, I've read all of her books, but Jessica Joyce does technically have a holiday novella that I haven't read called A Risk Worth Taking. Again, seeing as we're not in holiday season, I won't be reading that for a while, but I will certainly put it on my radar for next holiday season. So I'm just excited to see if she comes out with something this year. Again, she's on my radar for sure. Then the last romance author is Erin Connor. I read Unromance, which just came out in January, and it was her debut. This is about Sawyer Green, who is a best-selling romance author and has even had one of her books turned into a major film. However, she's run into a bit of writer's block after her girlfriend left her heartbroken. When she gets stuck in an elevator with a charming man, they decide to have a one-night stand. Except then they keep running into each other. Mason West is a famous actor, but when Sawyer doesn't recognize him, he decides to enjoy the anonymity for a night. He does come clean about his job when they run into each other again. It's not like this big mystery the whole time. He also tells her about how the tabloids are all over him for continuing to kind of fall head over heels for his co-stars and then subsequently get dumped. So they both decide to help each other out. Mason and Sawyer will do all the cheesy rom-com activities to help cure Sawyer's writer's block and help ruin cutesy love for Mason. I loved this book. Mason and Sawyer trying to ruin all the various romance tropes as a romance reader was hilarious and adorable. They joked and bantered throughout the whole book because they became friends first, besides the one-night stand, of course. They didn't just hop into a more physical relationship. They paused the one-night stand and just became friends first. Mason was probably my favorite character. He treated Sawyer so well, and I love a guy who's not afraid of his emotions. I love a good side character too, and Mason and Sawyer as best friends were great. Supportive and hilarious, my favorite combo. This book is actually set over the holidays, but it was subtle, so definitely don't hesitate to pick it up anytime. So obviously this one just came out, so I'm just excited to see what Erin Connor writes next. I don't know when that will be, but I am looking forward to it. If you stayed for all these romance recommendations, I'm impressed because there was a lot. Thank you so much. This is truly a full guide to contemporary romance books. Some mainstream, some indie, but definitely all of them I recommend. Let me know in the comments who your favorite romance author is. Who did I miss? Who should I check out? And if you aren't feeling super chatty but you just want to let me know that you are here, leave me a red heart emoji for romance, and I will see you on my next video. Bye!